The night Lena Ward signed her life away, she wore a borrowed dress and her father's blood on her hands. They didn't ask if she wanted to marry the city's most feared crime lord. They simply told her the price of refusal, her father's execution, her mother's ruin, and debts that would follow her family into the grave. So at 23, with mascara running down her cheeks and a contract she couldn't read through her tears, Lena became Mrs. Adrian Moretti, property of a man who looked at her once and made it clear she was nothing more than a business transaction he'd already forgotten. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far Lena's story travels. The apartment smelled like rust and fear. Lena pressed herself against the kitchen wall, fingers gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. In the living room, her father knelt on the floor, hands zip-tied behind his back, while two men in expensive suits stood over him like executioners waiting for the order. "Please," her father's voice cracked. "Just give me another week. I can get you the money." The taller man, a scar running from his temple to his jaw, backhanded him across the face. The sound echoed through the small apartment like a gunshot. Lena flinched. Her mother sobbed somewhere behind her, but Lena couldn't look away from the scene unfolding in their living room. Couldn't process what was happening. "Another week?" The scarred man laughed, cold and sharp. "You've had 6 months, Ward. 6 months of excuses and empty promises. Mister, Volkov's patience has limits." "I'll get it," her father gasped, blood trickling from his split lip. "I swear, you'll get nothing." The second man spoke for the first time, his voice flat and businesslike. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket and chambered a round with a metallic click that made Lena's stomach drop. "You had your chances." "No!" Lena's mother screamed. Time seemed to fracture. Lena's feet moved before her brain caught up, carrying her into the living room on pure instinct. "Wait, please, wait!" 3 sets of eyes turned to her. Her father's face went pale. "Lena, get back!" "Shut up!" The scarred man grabbed her father by the hair and yanked his head back, pressing the barrel of his gun against his temple. "Well, well, is this the daughter?" Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Don't hurt him, please. We'll find a way to pay." "You?" The man looked her up and down, something calculating sliding across his face. "What are you, 20? 22? What could you possibly offer that we'd want?" The words died in her throat. She had nothing. She was a waitress at a diner on 5th Street, living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in student loans she'd never be able to pay off. She had nothing these men would want, except there might be something. The businessman with the gun lowered his weapon slightly, studying her with cold, assessing eyes. "How old are you?" 23, Lena whispered. "Educated?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Any criminal record, drug habits, mental health issues?" "What the hell kind of questions?" her father started, but the scarred man pistol-whipped him silent. "Answer," the businessman said calmly, as if he was conducting a job interview instead of holding her family at gunpoint. "No," Lena managed. "No criminal record, no drugs. I'm clean." The 2 men exchanged a look. Something unspoken passed between them. "How much does he owe?" the scarred man asked his partner. $300,000 plus interest. Lena's knees nearly gave out. $300,000. Her father had told them it was a small loan, just to cover medical bills after her mother's accident. Just temporary. He'd lied. "Here's what's going to happen," the businessman said, holstering his gun. "You're going to come with us. Right now. No phone calls, no goodbyes, no packing a bag. You walk out that door, get in our car, and you don't look back." "Where are you taking her?" Her mother's voice was shrill with panic. "That's not your concern." The scarred man released her father and straightened his jacket. "You should be grateful. Your daughter just bought your worthless life." "No." Her father struggled against his restraints. "No, you can't take her. Would you prefer the alternative?" The businessman pulled his gun again. "Because I'm happy to end this right now." Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Lena looked at her father, bloodied, broken, desperate. Looked at her mother, tears streaming down her face. They'd raised her in this apartment, fed her, clothed her, loved her as best they knew how. And her father had gambled it all away on a loan from people who collected debts in blood. I'll go, she heard herself say. Lena, no. I'll go, she repeated, louder this time. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't know how, but it didn't shake. Just, don't hurt them. That's the deal, right? I go with you and you leave them alone? Smart girl. The scarred man smiled, and it was the ugliest thing Lena had ever seen. Very smart girl. They cut her father's zip ties and hauled him to his feet. Lena moved toward the door on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Where are you taking her? Her mother asked again, voice breaking. The businessman paused at the threshold. Mr. Moretti's estate. She has an appointment. The name hit Lena like ice water. Adrian Moretti. Everyone in the city knew that name. The crime lord who controlled everything from the docks to City Hall, whose enemies disappeared without a trace, whose name people only whispered when they were sure they were alone. And these men were taking her to him. No. Her father lurched forward. Please, not him. Anyone but him. I'll find the money, I swear to... The scarred man slammed the door in his face. The car was a black Mercedes with tinted windows and leather seats that probably cost more than Lena's entire apartment. She sat in the back, wedged between the two men, and watched the city scroll past through the darkened glass. Nobody spoke. Lena tried to catalog everything, street names, landmarks, anything that might help her find her way back. But the driver took so many turns she lost track after the first 10 minutes. By the time they left the city proper and headed into the hills where the real money lived, she'd given up trying to memorize the route. What does he want with me? She finally asked. The scarred man glanced at her. You'll find out soon enough. Is he going to kill me? If Mr. Moretti wanted you dead, we wouldn't have bothered with the car. It wasn't reassuring. The estate appeared like something from a nightmare, or a fairy tale, Lena couldn't decide which. Massive iron gates opened automatically as they approached, revealing a long driveway lined with old-growth trees. The house itself sat at the end like a sleeping giant, 3 stories of stone and glass, lit from within by warm golden light that looked obscene given the circumstances. The car stopped at the front entrance. A man in a butler's uniform, an actual butler's uniform, appeared and opened Lena's door. Miss Ward, he said, as if she was an expected guest and not a hostage. Please, come with me. The scarred man gave her a push. Move. Lena climbed out on shaking legs. The night air was cold, sharp with the smell of pine and money. She followed the butler up marble steps and through doors that probably weighed more than her car. The inside of the house was worse than the outside. Vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. Lena's wet sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as she walked, leaving dirty tracks she was sure someone would make her pay for later. The butler led her through a maze of hallways to a set of double doors. He knocked once, paused, then opened them. Miss Lena Ward, he announced. The office beyond was all dark wood and leather, books lining floor-to-ceiling shelves, a fireplace crackling in the corner, and behind a massive desk sat a man who made Lena's breath catch in her throat. Adrian Moretti was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the absolute coldness in his eyes. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie, and he was signing papers as if Lena wasn't even there. Sit, he said without looking up. Lena sat in one of the chairs across from his desk. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, so she clasped them together in her lap and tried to remember how to breathe. Moretti finished whatever he was working on, set down his pen, and finally looked at her. His eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, empty gray. You're younger than I expected, he said. I'm 23. I meant you look younger. He leaned back in his chair, studying her the way someone might study a car they were considering buying. Your father owes Dmitry Volkov $300,000. Are you aware of this? I just found out tonight. Volkov was going to kill him. Would have too, except I made him an offer. Moretti reached for a folder on his desk and slid it across to her. You're going to marry me. The words didn't make sense. Lena stared at the folder without touching it. What? I need a wife, for business purposes. Volkov needs his money. This solves both problems. He tapped the folder. Open it. Lena's hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside was a contract, pages and pages of legal text she couldn't focus on through the panic flooding her system. "I don't understand," she whispered. "It's very simple. You marry me. You live here. You follow the rules I set. In exchange, your father's debt is cleared and he and your mother remain unharmed. You break the contract or try to leave and Volkov's men finish what they started tonight. Do you understand now? You can't. This isn't legal. You can't force someone to marry you." "I'm not forcing you." Moretti's voice was flat, bored almost. "You're free to decline and leave right now. Of course, the moment you walk out that door, your father's protection ends. Volkov will have him by morning." He paused. "Your choice." It wasn't a choice, they both knew it. "Why me?" Lena asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Why do you need a wife?" "That's not your concern. If I'm supposed to marry you, I think I have a right to know, Asika." "You have no rights here." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Let me be very clear, Miss Ward. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. You will be my wife on paper only. You will live in this house, attend events when required, and stay out of my way the rest of the time. What you do not get is an explanation, a partnership, or any illusions about what this is. You are a solution to a problem. That's all." Lena felt something crack inside her chest. She looked down at the contract, at all the words swimming before her eyes, and tried to find some way out of this that didn't end with her father dead. There wasn't one. "Where do I sign?" she heard herself ask. Something flickered across Moretti's face, surprise maybe, or approval, she couldn't tell. He reached into his desk and produced an expensive-looking pen. "Page 12. Initial every page before it." It took 10 minutes to sign her life away. Lena's hand cramped by the end, and the pen left ink stains on her fingers that looked like bruises. When she finished, Moretti took the contract, reviewed it with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, and filed it away in his desk. "The wedding is tomorrow," he said. 6 p.m. A judge will come here to perform the ceremony. You'll be provided with appropriate clothing." "Tomorrow?" Lena's voice cracked. "But my parents?" "Your parents will be notified after the fact. You're not to contact them until I give permission." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Elena will show you to your room. Don't leave it until you're summoned." "It's Lena," she said stupidly. "Not Elena, just Lena." He looked at her like she'd said something in a foreign language. "I don't care. We're done here." The butler materialized at the door as if he'd been waiting just outside. "This way, miss." Lena stood on numb legs and followed him out. Behind her, she heard Moretti's chair scrape as he sat back down, already moving on to whatever came next, already forgetting she existed. The room they gave her was bigger than her entire apartment. King-size bed, private bathroom, a balcony overlooking the grounds. It was a prison with nice furniture. Lena sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. The ink stains stood out stark against her pale skin. In less than 24 hours, she'd gone from serving coffee at the diner to signing a contract that made her the property of the most dangerous man in the city. She should cry, should scream, should throw something at the walls and demand they let her out. Instead, she felt nothing. Just a vast, empty coldness that spread through her chest and made everything feel far away and unreal. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she said automatically. A woman entered, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing slacks and a crisp white blouse. She carried several shopping bags and a garment bag draped over one arm. "I'm Mara," she said, her accent Eastern European. "I'll be helping you prepare for tomorrow." "Prepare," Lena repeated dully. "The wedding." Mara set the bags down on the bed and unzipped the garment bag. Inside was a dress, simple, elegant ivory silk that probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months. "We'll need to make sure it fits." "I don't need to try it on." "Mr. Moretti requires—" "I don't care what he requires." Lena's voice came out sharper than she intended. "He bought me. He can deal with whatever I look like." Mara's expression didn't change. "It will be easier if you cooperate." "Easier for who?" "For you." They stared at each other. Then Mara sighed and sat down in the chair by the window, the dress still draped over her arm. "I know you're scared," she said quietly, "and angry. You have every right to be both. But fighting Mr. Moretti won't change anything. It will only make things harder." Things are already hard, Lena said. My father sold me to pay his debts. I'm being forced to marry a stranger tomorrow. How exactly do things get harder than this? You'd be surprised. Mara's voice was soft, sad almost. I've worked in this house for 5 years. I've seen people try to fight Mr. Moretti. It never ends well. So what, I'm just supposed to accept this? Smile and pretend everything's fine? I'm saying pick your battles. Save your energy for the things that matter. Mara stood and laid the dress across the foot of the bed. Try it on or don't. But tomorrow at 6 p.m., you'll be downstairs in the main hall, and you'll marry Mr. Moretti. Everything else is just details. She left without waiting for a response. Lena sat alone in the expensive prison of her room and listened to the silence. Somewhere in this massive house, Adrienne Moretti was probably working or eating or doing whatever crime lords did in their spare time, not thinking about her, not caring that he'd just destroyed someone's entire life. She looked at the dress, looked at the bathroom door, thought about the balcony and the 3-story drop to the ground and whether it would be enough. But her father's face flashed through her mind, bloodied, desperate, begging them not to take her. Her mother's sobs, the gun against her father's temple. Lena stood up and walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower as hot as it would go, and stood under the spray until the water ran cold. Washed off the city, the fear, the feeling of hands grabbing her in her apartment. When she finally climbed into the enormous bed, she didn't sleep. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling and counting down the hours until she became Mrs. Adrienne Moretti. The wedding was exactly as cold and transactional as she'd expected. The judge was an older man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He stood in the main hall, a cavernous room with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than most houses, and read through the ceremony with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Lena wore the ivory dress. It fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. Mara had done her hair and makeup, transforming her into someone who looked like they belonged in a place like this. A stranger in the mirror. Moretti wore a black suit and looked like he was attending a business meeting. He stood next to her, not quite close enough to touch, and stared straight ahead while the judge droned on about commitment and partnership and other lies. There were no guests, no flowers, no music. Just the judge, Moretti, Lena, and Mara standing in as a witness. Do you, Adrienne Moretti, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation, no emotion. Just 2 words that sealed Lena's fate. And do you, Lena Ward, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Lena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Moretti's hand closed around her wrist. Not hard, but firm. A reminder. Her father's face flashed through her mind again. The gun, the blood. I do, she whispered. Then by the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The judge closed his book. You may kiss the bride. Moretti looked at her for the first time since the ceremony began. His gray eyes were completely empty. That won't be necessary, he said. The judge blinked. But tradition? We're done here. Moretti released Lena's wrist and turned to Mara. Make sure he's paid and escorted out. And just like that, it was over. Lena was married to a man who wouldn't even kiss her, standing in a room that cost more than her entire life was worth, wearing a ring she didn't remember him putting on her finger. Mrs. Adrienne Moretti. Property. Nothing. Moretti was already walking away, pulling out his phone to check messages. Lena stood frozen in her expensive dress and watched him disappear through a door without looking back. Come on, Mara said gently, touching her elbow. I'll show you where you'll be staying. I already have a room. That was temporary. You have different quarters now. Lena let herself be led through the house, up a different set of stairs, down a different hallway. Everything looked the same, expensive, pristine, empty. Mara opened a door to reveal a suite that made Lena's previous room look like a closet. Sitting area, bedroom, bathroom, walk-in closet, already filled with clothes Lena had never seen before. This is the East Wing, Mara explained. Mister, Moretti's rooms are in the West Wing. You'll have privacy here. How considerate, Lena said flatly. There are rules. Mara's voice was businesslike now. You're not to leave the estate without permission and an escort. You're not to contact anyone outside without Mr. Moretti's approval. Breakfast is at 8, lunch at 1, dinner at 7. You're expected to attend dinner unless you're told otherwise. What if I don't? Then you'll be brought to the dining room anyway. It's easier to just come on your own. Mara moved toward the door. Try to rest. Tomorrow you'll start learning how things work around here. And what exactly do I do all day in my beautiful prison? Mara paused in the doorway. Whatever you want. Read, watch TV, walk the grounds. Just don't leave and don't cause trouble. Or what? Or Mr. Moretti will remind you what happens to people who break their contracts. Something in Mara's voice made Lena's blood run cold. Trust me, you don't want that. She left, and Lena was alone again. She walked through her new quarters like a ghost, opening drawers and closets, finding everything a person could possibly need. Clothes in her size, shoes, jewelry. A laptop on the desk, though when she opened it, she found most websites blocked, and no email access. She sat at the window and looked out at the grounds. It was beautiful in a sterile way. Perfect lawns, sculpted gardens, a fountain in the distance. A cage made of money and marble. Night fell. Lena changed into pajamas someone had left for her and climbed into the massive bed. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just lay there in the dark and tried to figure out how she was going to survive this. Somewhere in the West Wing, her husband, was probably already asleep, or working, or doing whatever he did when he wasn't ruining people's lives. Lena closed her eyes and wondered if this was what drowning felt like. The first week passed in a blur of silence and routine. Breakfast alone in her room, lunch alone in her room, dinner in a formal dining room that could seat 30, sitting at one end of a table while Moretti sat at the other, 20 feet of polished wood between them. They didn't speak. He read papers or checked his phone, and she pushed food around her plate and counted the minutes until she could leave. Mara appeared every morning with schedules and reminders. The house operated like a machine, staff everywhere but invisible, everything running on clockwork precision. Lena learned the rules through trial and error. Don't wander into the West Wing. Don't ask questions about Moretti's business. Don't expect anyone to tell you anything real. She was a ghost in her own life. Present but not acknowledged. Married but alone. On the 8th day, she broke. It happened at dinner. Moretti was reading something on his tablet, completely ignoring her as usual. Lena had spent the entire day alone in her room, staring at walls and trying not to lose her mind. And something inside her just snapped. Do you even remember my name? She asked. Moretti didn't look up. Excuse me. My name. Do you remember it? Or am I just the wife in your head? He set down his tablet and looked at her with those cold gray eyes. Is there a point to this? The point is, I'm a person. I have a name. I had a life before you bought me. You signed the contract willingly. Because you threatened to kill my father. Lena's voice rose despite herself. You gave me no choice, and you know it. I gave you a choice. You made it. Now you're upset about the consequences. He picked up his tablet again. Grow up. The words hit like a slap. Lena stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. You're a bastard, she said, voice shaking. A cold, heartless bastard who thinks money gives him the right to treat people like property. Moretti's expression didn't change. Are you finished? No, I'm not finished. I don't care what you want. He stood up, and suddenly the room felt smaller. You want to know why I don't remember your name? Because you don't matter. You're a contract, a signature on a piece of paper. I needed a wife for business reasons, and you were convenient. That's it. There's no deeper meaning, no secret heart of gold waiting to be discovered. This is what it is, and the sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. Lena felt tears burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. I hope you rot in hell. I'm already there. He walked toward the door, then paused. And for the record, your name is Lena. I remember it just fine. I simply don't care. He left. Lena stood in the empty dining room and let the tears come. She cried for her parents, for her old life, for the girl she used to be before debt collectors showed up at her door. Cried until she had nothing left. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and went back to her room. If Moretti wanted her to disappear, to fade into the background like expensive furniture, she'd prove him wrong. She didn't know how yet, But she'd find a way. She had to. Because the alternative was drowning in this beautiful, terrible prison, and Lena Ward didn't drown, even when the water closed over her head. The next morning, Lena woke to find Mara standing in her doorway with an expression that looked almost apologetic. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you in his office," Mara said. "Now." Lena's stomach dropped. She'd gone to bed half expecting guards to drag her out in the middle of the night for her outburst at dinner. The fact that she'd made it to morning felt like a small miracle. "What does he want?" "He didn't say, but you should hurry. He doesn't like to be kept waiting." Lena pulled on jeans and a sweater, ran a brush through her hair, and followed Mara through the maze of hallways. Her heart hammered against her ribs with each step. She'd called him a bastard to his face, told him she hoped he'd rot in hell. Men like Moretti didn't forgive things like that. Mara knocked on the office door, opened it, and gestured for Lena to enter alone. Moretti sat behind his desk, looking exactly as he had every other time she'd seen him, composed, cold, untouchable. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said. Lena sat. Her hands twisted together in her lap. Several long seconds passed. Moretti signed something, set it aside, and finally looked at her. "You're angry," he said. "I understand that. But if you ever raise your voice to me again, there will be consequences. Am I clear?" "Crystal," Lena said through clenched teeth. "Good." He pulled a file from his desk and opened it. "You have a degree in early childhood education from State. You were 3 credits short of graduating when you dropped out to take care of your mother after her accident. Is that correct?" The shift in topic threw her. "How do you know that?" "I know everything about you, Lena. Your transcripts, your employment history, your medical records. I know you're allergic to shellfish and that you broke your arm falling off a bike when you were 9. I know your blood type and your social security number." He closed the file. "When I acquire something, I make sure I know exactly what I'm getting." The word acquire made her skin crawl. "Why does any of that matter?" "Because you need something to do with your time, and sitting in your room feeling sorry for yourself isn't sustainable." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. "There's a private school 20 minutes from here. They need someone to help with their after-school program. 3 days a week, 2 hours per day. You'll be paid, though the money will go into an account I control." Lena stared at the paper without touching it. "You're letting me work?" "I'm giving you something to do so you stop moping around my house like a ghost." He leaned back in his chair. "You'll have a driver. You'll have security. You will not deviate from the approved route or schedule. You will not contact anyone from your old life. You will not discuss me, this house, or our arrangement with anyone. Break any of these rules and the opportunity disappears. Understood?" It was a leash disguised as freedom. A longer leash than before, but still a leash. "When do I start?" Lena asked quietly. "Monday. Mara will go over the details with you." He picked up his pen, already dismissing her. "You're free to go." Lena stood, but something made her pause at the door. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Giving me this job. You made it very clear last night that you don't care about me." Moretti's expression didn't change. "I don't. But you're difficult to ignore when you're making scenes at dinner. Consider this self-interest on my part." The words should have stung. Maybe they did. But Lena was too focused on the fact that she was getting out of this house, even if only for 6 hours a week, to care about his motivations. "Thank you," she said, hating herself a little for meaning it. He didn't respond. She left. Mara was waiting in the hallway, and together they walked back toward Lena's room. The older woman's face was carefully neutral, but Lena thought she saw something like approval in her eyes. "That went better than expected," Mara said. "Did you know about the job?" "I suggested it." Mara stopped at Lena's door. "You needed something. He needed you to stop disrupting his routine. It worked out." "So you manipulated him?" "I gave him a solution to a problem he didn't know he had." Mara's lips quirked in something that might have been a smile. "There's a difference. Now come on, we need to go over the security protocols before Monday." The weekend dragged by in its usual glacial pace, but Monday morning arrived with a jolt of something Lena hadn't felt in weeks: anticipation. She dressed carefully in clothes that felt more like her old self, tied her hair back, and met her driver at the front entrance precisely at 2 p.m. The driver was a man named Thomas, mid-40s, built like a boxer, with kind eyes that didn't match his intimidating frame. He opened the car door for her without comment, and they drove in silence through the hills and back toward the city. Lena pressed her face against the window and watched the world scroll by. Normal people doing normal things. Walking dogs, waiting at bus stops, carrying groceries. A life she'd been part of just weeks ago that now felt like a distant dream. The school was a brick building tucked into a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees starting to show their autumn colors. Children's artwork decorated the windows. The parking lot was half full of minivans and sensible sedans. 2 hours, Thomas said as he parked. I'll be right here when you're done. Lena nodded and climbed out. The security guard, a second man who'd been following in another car, positioned himself near the entrance but didn't follow her inside. Small mercies. The principal, Mrs. Chen, greeted her with a warm smile and a handshake that felt genuine. Mrs. Moretti, thank you so much for volunteering your time. We're thrilled to have you. The name still felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. But Lena smiled and nodded and followed Mrs. Chen to a bright, cheerful room where a dozen kids between ages 6 and 8 were working on various projects. This is our after-school enrichment program, Mrs. Chen explained. We focus on creative activities, art, music, storytelling. The kids just need supervision and someone to help when they get stuck. She raised her voice. Everyone, this is Mrs. Moretti. She's going to be helping out from now on. A chorus of "Hi, Mrs. Moretti" echoed through the room. And just like that, for the first time since the night her life fell apart, Lena felt like herself again. The 2 hours flew by. She helped a little girl named Sophie with a painting of her dog, refereed a dispute between two boys fighting over Legos, read a story to a group of kids who sat cross-legged on the carpet and hung on every word. It was normal. Beautifully, perfectly normal. When Thomas appeared at the door to collect her, Lena felt a sharp pang of loss. She said goodbye to the kids, promised she'd be back Wednesday, and followed him to the car. Good first day? He asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. Better than good, Lena admitted. She spent the drive back trying to hold on to that feeling, the lightness, the sense of purpose. But as the estate came into view, its massive gates swinging open to swallow them whole, the weight settled back onto her chest. This was still her reality. The school was just a brief reprieve. Dinner that night was the same as always. Moretti at one end of the table, Lena at the other, silence stretching between them like a chasm. But something had shifted. Lena didn't feel quite as invisible as before. How was your first day? Moretti asked without looking up from his phone. The question surprised her so much she almost dropped her fork. Fine. Good. The kids were great. That was it. The entire extent of their conversation. But it was more than they'd exchanged in a week, and Lena didn't know what to do with that. She went to bed that night feeling slightly less like she was drowning. The routine continued. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the school. The rest of the week trapped in the estate, wandering the grounds or reading in her room. Dinners with Moretti where they sometimes exchanged a sentence or two, sometimes nothing at all. Lena started to map the house in her spare time, learning its rhythms. The staff moved like clockwork. Housekeepers in the morning, gardeners in the afternoon, kitchen staff preparing elaborate meals that Lena and Moretti barely touched. She learned which hallways were busy and which were usually empty. Learned that the library on the second floor had books nobody had touched in years and a window seat where she could watch the sun set over the hills. She learned that Moretti's office was off limits to everyone except Mara and a handful of men in expensive suits who came and went at odd hours. That he worked late into the night, lights burning in the west wing long after the rest of the house went dark. She learned that she was watched always. Not obviously, but she'd catch movement in her peripheral vision, see the same faces in different parts of the grounds, notice Thomas's car following her even when she just walked to the fountain and back. It should have made her paranoid. Maybe it did, but mostly it just made her tired. 3 weeks into her new routine, everything changed. It started with small things. Her laptop, which had been sitting on her desk untouched for days, was moved slightly to the left. Drawers in her dresser that she'd left open were closed. A book she'd been reading disappeared from her nightstand, only to reappear 2 days later in a different room. At first, Lena thought she was imagining it. or that the housekeepers were moving things while they cleaned. But then she found a photograph tucked into one of her books. A picture of her at the school, standing with Sophie and the other kids. Someone had taken it without her knowledge. Someone had been watching her. She brought it to Mara that afternoon, hands shaking as she held out the photograph. "Where did you get this?" Mara's face went pale. "It was in my room. In a book I was reading. Someone put it there." Mara took the photograph and studied it carefully. "Wait here." She disappeared for 10 minutes. When she returned, her expression was grim. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you, now." Lena followed her to the office, that familiar dread pooling in her stomach. But when Mara opened the door, Moretti wasn't alone. 2 men stood near his desk. One she recognized as his head of security, a massive man named Victor. The other was younger, leaner, with sharp eyes that tracked her movement as she entered. "Sit," Moretti said. Lena sat. He held up the photograph. "How long has this been happening?" "I don't know. A few days? Maybe longer. Things have been moving around my room. I thought I was imagining it, but then I found that." "What kind of things?" "My laptop, books, clothes, small stuff." Moretti's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He handed the photograph to Victor. "Find out who's been in her room outside of the regular cleaning schedule. I want names and access logs by the end of the day." "Yes, sir." "And increase security around the East Wing. No one goes near her rooms without my explicit approval." Victor nodded and left, taking the younger man with him. Lena was alone with Moretti and Mara. "Is someone trying to hurt me?" Lena asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "I don't know yet." Moretti's eyes were cold, calculating. "But someone is watching you, someone with access to this house." He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "You don't leave the estate until we figure out who and why. No more school visits." "But the kids are not my concern. Your safety is." He turned to look at her. "Someone knows you're here, knows your routine. That photograph was taken 3 days ago, which means whoever this is, they've been following you for at least that long without my security noticing." The words settled over Lena like ice water. Someone had been watching her, following her, getting close enough to take pictures. "Who would do that?" she whispered. "That's what we're going to find out." Moretti's voice was flat, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. "Until then, you stay in the house. You don't go anywhere alone. If you see anything unusual, you report it to Mara immediately. Understood?" Lena nodded. "Say it." "I understand." "Good. Mara will stay with you for the rest of the day. Don't argue about it." He dismissed them with a wave of his hand, already pulling out his phone to make calls. Lena left with Mara, her legs unsteady. "Who would want to hurt me?" she asked as they walked back to her room. "I'm nobody. I don't know anything about his business. I'm just—" "You're his wife," Mara said quietly. "That makes you a target. But he doesn't even care about me. Everyone knows that." "Do they?" Mara glanced at her. "You're in his house. You wear his ring. To the outside world, you're leverage. A way to get to him. That's insane. That's the world you married into." They reached Lena's room, and Mara did a thorough sweep, checking windows, closets, under the bed. She found nothing, but the violation remained. Someone had been in here, touching Lena's things, watching. "I'll be right outside, Mara said. "Try to rest." But Lena couldn't rest. She sat on her bed and stared at the door, imagining shadows moving in the hallway, hands reaching for the doorknob. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the house settling felt like footsteps. She'd thought being trapped in this house was the worst thing that could happen to her. She'd been wrong. Hours passed. Dinner came and went. Mara brought her a tray since Moretti had canceled the formal meal. Night fell, and the house went quiet in that eerie way it did after dark, like it was holding its breath. Lena was drifting off to sleep, exhausted from adrenaline and fear, when voices outside her door jerked her awake. "Can't just keep her locked up like a prisoner? That's exactly what I can do." Moretti's voice, sharp and cold. "Someone's been in this house, Mara. Someone who shouldn't be here. Until I know who, she doesn't leave this wing. She's going to lose her mind. Then she loses her mind. Better than losing her life." Silence. Then Mara, quieter now. "You care about her." "I care about not looking weak." A pause. If something happens to her, people will think I can't protect what's mine. That's unacceptable. Keep telling yourself that. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. Lena lay in the dark and tried to process what she'd just heard. Moretti wasn't worried about her. He was worried about his reputation, about looking weak. It shouldn't have surprised her. It didn't surprise her. So why did it hurt? The next 3 days crawled by in a haze of boredom and fear. Lena wasn't allowed to leave her room except for meals, which were now served in a small dining room adjacent to the kitchen instead of the formal hall. Mara stayed with her constantly, a silent presence that was both comforting and suffocating. Victor came by twice to update them, or rather, to update Mara, since he barely looked at Lena. They'd reviewed security footage, interviewed staff, checked access logs. So far, nothing concrete. Whoever had been in Lena's room knew how to avoid cameras and leave no trace. On the 4th day, Moretti summoned her to his office again. This time, he looked tired. Not exhausted exactly. Men like him didn't show exhaustion, but there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "We found something," he said without preamble. "One of the housekeepers, Maria, had access to your room outside of her normal schedule. She claims she was covering for another staff member who called in sick. Do you believe her?" "No." He pulled up something on his computer and turned the screen toward her. Security footage showed a woman in a housekeeper's uniform entering Lena's room, moving quickly to the desk, and placing something, the photograph, inside a book before leaving. That's not how someone acts when they're just cleaning. So it was her? It was her putting the photograph there, but someone gave it to her. Someone took it. He closed the laptop. "Maria won't talk. She's too scared." "Scared of who?" "That's the question." Moretti leaned back in his chair. "I have enemies, Lena. More than I can count. Any one of them could be using you to get to me." "Then let me go." The words burst out before she could stop them. "If I'm putting you in danger, if this is going to cause you problems, just let me go. Tear up the contract, I'll disappear, and you can go back to—" "No." "Why not? You said I don't matter. You said I'm just a contract, so void it." "Because that's not how this works." He stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You're mine, Lena. I don't give back what belongs to me, and I sure as hell don't let people think they can take it. Whoever's doing this needs to learn that lesson." The possessiveness in his voice made her skin prickle. Not with fear, exactly. Something else she didn't want to examine too closely. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now you go back to your normal routine. School visits resume tomorrow." "But you said—" "I know what I said, but keeping you locked up sends the wrong message. It tells whoever's watching that they're winning." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than coldness there, something almost like determination. "You're going to keep going to that school. Victor's team will increase security, and I'm assigning someone to stay with you at all times." Mara already— not Mara. He walked to the door and opened it. "Come in." A woman entered, late 20s, athletic build, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that cataloged everything in the room in seconds. She moved like a trained fighter, all controlled grace and coiled energy. "This is Irina," Moretti said. "Former military, extensive protection training. She'll be your shadow from now on." Irina nodded to Lena, but didn't smile. "Ma'am?" "I don't need a bodyguard," Lena protested. "You don't get a choice." Moretti returned to his desk, already dismissing them. "Irina goes everywhere you go. She sleeps in the room adjacent to yours. She's armed at all times. If she tells you to do something, you do it immediately without question. Clear?" Lena looked at Irina, who looked back with professional detachment. Another leash, another reminder that she was property to be protected, not a person to be trusted. "Crystal," Lena said bitterly. She left with Irina following 2 steps behind and tried not to feel like the walls were closing in. That night at dinner, Moretti actually spoke to her. Not much, a question about whether she was ready to return to the school, a comment about the weather. But it was more than usual, and Lena didn't know what to make of it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Doing what?" "Pretending to care. Talking to me like I'm a person." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "I'm not pretending anything." "Then what is this? What are we doing?" "Eating dinner." "You know what I mean." Moretti was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, picked up his wine glass, and walked to the window overlooking the grounds. "When I was 12, he said, his back to her, my father was killed by a rival family. They made it public, messy. A message to anyone who thought about challenging their territory." He took a sip of wine. "My mother tried to run. Took me and my brother and tried to disappear. They found us in 3 days. Killed her in front of us." Lena's breath caught. She'd never heard him talk about his past before. Wasn't sure she wanted to hear this. "The man who killed her looked at me and my brother and said, 'You're worth more alive, for now.'" Moretti's voice was flat, emotionless. "They kept us for 2 years, used us as leverage against our father's old associates, fed us just enough to keep us breathing, beat us just enough to keep us obedient." "How did you get out?" "I didn't. I earned my freedom by being useful, by proving I was more valuable as an asset than as a hostage." He turned to face her, and the emptiness in his eyes made her chest ache. "I learned very young that in this world, you're either someone's property or someone's master. There's no in-between." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You're here because your father couldn't pay his debts. Your property that changed hands, same as I was." He moved back to the table but didn't sit. "The difference is, I'm not going to beat you. I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm also not going to pretend this is something it's not. You belong to me, Lena, and I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours," she said, but the words came out weaker than she intended. "You're wearing my ring. You're living in my house. Your safety is my responsibility." His jaw tightened. "Someone's testing me by going after you. They need to understand that's a mistake." "So this is still just about your reputation?" "Yes." He said it without hesitation. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to let anything happen to you." It wasn't a declaration of affection. It wasn't love or even basic human decency. It was cold, calculated self-interest. But it was also the most honest he'd been with her since the day they met. Lena didn't know how to respond, so she didn't. She finished her meal in silence while Moretti returned to his seat and his phone. When she excused herself, he didn't look up. But as she walked to the door, he spoke. "Lena," she paused, "don't make me regret giving you freedom." She left without answering. Irina was waiting in the hallway, silent and watchful. Together they walked back to Lena's room, and for the first time since arriving at the estate, Lena didn't feel completely alone. She had a bodyguard who didn't speak, a husband who saw her as property, and someone out there who wanted to use her as a weapon against a man who'd made it very clear he didn't care about her. Lena climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out how her life had become this nightmare, trying even harder to understand why Moretti's cold promise of protection had made her feel safer than she'd felt in weeks. Returning to the school should have felt like relief. Instead, Lena spent the entire drive watching the side mirrors, cataloging every car that followed too long, every face that appeared more than once. Irina sat beside her in the back seat, silent and alert, one hand resting casually near the concealed weapon Lena now knew she carried. Thomas pulled up to the school's entrance, and Victor's second car parked directly behind them. 3 armed guards for a 2-hour shift helping kids with art projects. The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. "Stay close to the building," Irina said as Lena reached for the door handle. "Don't go near the parking lot perimeter. If I tell you to move, you move immediately. I'm going inside a school, not a war zone." To someone watching, it's the same thing. Irina's dark eyes were flat, professional. 2 hours. Then we leave. The kids mobbed Lena the moment she walked into the classroom, all talking at once about what they'd done while she was gone. Sophie attached herself to Lena's leg and refused to let go. "We missed you," the little girl said. "Mrs. Chen said you were sick." "I'm better now." Lena knelt down to Sophie's level and managed what she hoped was a convincing smile. "What are we working on today?" The next 2 hours passed in a blur of paint and glitter and children's laughter. Lena helped build a cardboard castle, refereed another Lego dispute, and read 3 different stories to kids who couldn't agree on which book they wanted to hear. For a little while, she almost forgot about the bodyguard standing by the door, the security detail outside, the photograph of her that someone had taken without permission. Almost. But then she'd catch Irina's reflection in the window, or notice the way the other teacher kept glancing nervously at the armed woman in the corner, and reality would come crashing back. When Thomas appeared to collect her, Lena said goodbye to the kids and followed Irina to the car. The security team formed a loose perimeter around them as they walked, and Lena felt dozens of eyes watching from the school windows. "Was it like this before?" she asked as they pulled away. "When I came here before, were people watching me?" "Yes," Irina said simply. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "You didn't need to know. Now you do." They rode in silence back to the estate. Lena stared out the window and tried not to think about how many normal moments in her life had been anything but. How many times had she been watched without knowing? How many photographs existed that she'd never seen? Moretti was waiting in the entrance hall when they arrived, which was unusual enough to make Lena stop in her tracks. "How was it?" he asked. "Fine. The kids were happy to see me." "Any problems?" "No." She glanced at Irina, who shook her head slightly. Everything was normal. "Good." He started to turn away, then paused. "I need you at dinner tonight. We're having guests." Lena's stomach tightened. "What kind of guests?" "Business associates. You'll be introduced as my wife, you'll smile and make small talk, and you'll leave when I tell you to leave." His tone was clipped, businesslike. "Mara will help you get ready. Dinner is at 7. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Lena standing in the entrance hall with Irina. "What just happened?" Lena asked. "You're about to be displayed," Irina said. "Come on, Mara will explain." Mara was already in Lena's room, pulling dresses from the closet and laying them across the bed. She looked up when they entered, her expression carefully neutral. "He told you about tonight?" "Barely. What's going on?" "Mr. Moretti has business to conduct. Having you there sends a message that his personal life is stable, that he's in control." Mara held up a navy blue dress. "This one. Conservative but elegant." "I'm a prop," Lena said flatly. "You're his wife. There's a difference." Mara set the dress aside and started laying out jewelry. "These are dangerous men, Lena. You need to be careful. Don't ask questions about their business. Don't offer opinions. Just smile, be polite, and let Mr. Moretti do the talking." "What if they ask me questions?" "Answer simply and redirect to your husband." Mara met her eyes. "This isn't like your school visits. These men will be looking for weakness. Don't give them any." 2 hours later, Lena stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly. The jewelry was understated but clearly expensive, and Mara had styled her hair into something elegant and controlled. She looked like she belonged in Moretti's world. She hated it. "Ready?" Mara asked. "No." "Good. That means you're paying attention." Mara led her downstairs to the formal dining room Lena had only seen once before, on her wedding day. It had been transformed, candles lit, the table set with china that probably cost more than a car, wine already breathing in crystal decanters. Moretti stood near the fireplace, talking in low tones with Victor. He wore a black suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual, and when he turned to look at Lena, something flickered across his face too quickly to identify. "You look acceptable," he said. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me," Lena shot back before she could stop herself. Victor's mouth twitched, but Moretti's expression remained cold. "The guests will arrive in 10 minutes. You'll sit beside me at dinner. If anyone asks about our marriage, you'll say we met through mutual friends and fell in love quickly. If anyone asks about your background, you'll be vague. Your father worked in finance, your mother was a teacher, nothing more specific than that. You want me to lie? I want you to survive the evening without creating problems." He moved closer, and Lena caught the scent of expensive cologne and something sharper, tension, maybe. Fear. "These men are not your friends, Lena. They're not even my friends. They're predators looking for any sign of weakness. Don't be weak." "What happens if I am?" "Then we both pay for it." He held her gaze for a long moment, and Lena saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Concern. Not for her, probably. For himself, for his reputation. But it was there nonetheless. "Just follow my lead. Can you do that?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. The doorbell rang. Moretti's expression smoothed into something pleasant and cold, and he offered Lena his arm. "Showtime." She took it, and together they walked to greet the monsters. There were four of them. The first was an older man, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face like weathered leather. He introduced himself as Dmitry Volkov, and Lena's blood ran cold. This was the man her father had borrowed money from, the man who'd sent those collectors to their apartment. "So this is the famous bride," Volkov said, taking Lena's hand and kissing it in a gesture that made her skin crawl. "Adrian, you didn't mention she was so lovely." "I don't discuss my personal life," Moretti said smoothly. "Dmitry, you remember Victor, and this is Marcus Chen, Antonio Ricci, and James Brennan." The other three men stepped forward to shake hands. Chen was younger, maybe 40, with calculating eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Ricci looked like someone's friendly uncle, which made him instantly more frightening than the others. And Brennan was enormous, 6'5" at least, with hands like sledgehammers. They moved to the dining room, and Lena found herself seated between Moretti and Volkov. She focused on her breathing, on keeping her hand steady as the first course was served. "How long have you two been married?" Chen asked from across the table. 6 weeks, Moretti said before Lena could answer. "It was a small ceremony, family only." "How romantic," Volkov's voice dripped with amusement. "I didn't know you had a romantic bone in your body, Adrian." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Dmitry." "Clearly." Volkov turned to Lena. "Tell me, my dear, how did you meet?" Lena's mind went blank. She could feel Moretti's eyes on her, waiting. "Through friends," she managed. "At a charity event. We started talking and realized we had a lot in common." "A charity event," Ricci repeated, his friendly smile never wavering. "Which one?" "Does it matter?" Moretti's voice was pleasant, but carried an edge. "We're here to discuss business, not my love life." Of course. Ricci raised his wine glass. "To the happy couple." The others echoed the toast, and Lena forced herself to drink. The wine tasted like ashes. Conversation shifted to business after that. Shipments and territories and names Lena didn't recognize. She ate mechanically and tried to make herself invisible, but she could feel Volkov watching her, assessing her. "Your father is Robert Ward, isn't he?" Volkov said suddenly. The room went quiet. Lena's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Yes," she said carefully. "I've done business with him. Nice man. Terrible with money, though." Volkov's smile was sharp. "I'm glad to see his debts were settled so amicably." The implication hung in the air like poison. Everyone at the table understood what he was really saying. That Lena had been sold to Moretti to clear her father's debts. That she was a transaction, not a wife. Moretti's hand landed on Lena's thigh under the table, a warning to stay quiet. His fingers pressed hard enough to bruise. "Robert and I came to an understanding," Moretti said, his voice dangerously soft. "His family is under my protection now, permanently." "How generous of you." Volkov's eyes glittered. "I hope she's worth the investment." Moretti's fingers tightened on Lena's leg. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from gasping. "She's my wife," Moretti said. "That's all that matters." The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. Lena could see it in the way the other men looked at her now, with pity or amusement or calculating interest. She was exposed, a weakness in Moretti's armor. Dinner dragged on for another hour. By the time dessert was served, Lena's face hurt from forcing smiles, and her leg ached where Moretti's hand had gripped her. Finally, mercifully, Moretti stood. "Gentlemen, let's move to my office for drinks. Lena, you're free to retire for the evening." It was a dismissal, and Lena took it gratefully. She excused herself and walked from the dining room on shaking legs, aware of Volkov's eyes following her every step. Mara was waiting in the hallway. "How bad?" "Bad." Lena's voice cracked. "Volkov knows. They all know. They know my father sold me to clear his debts." "They probably knew before tonight. Dmitry Volkov doesn't miss anything." Mara guided her toward the stairs. "Come on, let's get you out of that dress." But as they reached the second floor, voices drifted up from the entrance hall. Lena paused, recognizing Moretti's tone. Sharp, controlled anger barely leashed. "You had no right to bring that up at my table," he was saying. "Bring up what? The truth?" Volkov laughed. "Everyone knows you bought her, Adrian. Pretending otherwise doesn't change reality. What I do with my personal life is none of your concern." Except it is my concern when it shows weakness. That girl is a liability. Anyone with eyes can see you're trying too hard to protect her. I protect what's mine. That's exactly the problem. Volkov's voice hardened. You're getting soft. First you marry some nobody to settle a debt, then you parade her around like she matters. People are starting to talk, Adrian. They're starting to wonder if you've lost your edge. Let them wonder. I'm trying to help you. Get rid of her. Send her back to her pathetic family. Show everyone you're still the man you were before this ridiculous marriage. Silence stretched. Lena held her breath, waiting for Moretti's response. Get out of my house, Moretti finally said, his voice like ice. And don't come back unless you're invited. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was letting you disrespect my wife at my own table. Next time, I won't be so forgiving. Footsteps, the front door opening and closing, then nothing. Mara touched Lena's arm. Come on. You shouldn't be listening. But Lena couldn't move. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what she'd just heard. Moretti had defended her, had thrown Volkov out for insulting her. The same man who'd told her repeatedly that she meant nothing to him. Why would he do that? She whispered. Because you're his wife, Mara said. And whatever else he might feel, he takes that seriously. They continued up to Lena's room, and Mara helped her change and remove her makeup. But Lena's thoughts kept circling back to that conversation, to the edge in Moretti's voice when he'd told Volkov to leave. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand the man she'd married. The man who treated her like property one moment and defended her honor the next. Who told her she meant nothing but gripped her leg under the table like he was afraid she'd disappear. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, her dreams were full of gray eyes and cold hands and voices saying she was worth the investment. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Irina standing in her doorway. Get dressed, Irina said. Mr. Moretti wants to see you. Lena's heart sank. Now? 5 minutes ago, move. She pulled on jeans and a sweater and followed Irina to Moretti's office, dread building with every step. He was going to tell her that last night had been a disaster, that she'd embarrassed him, that the deal was off and she was being sent back to her father. But when she entered the office, Moretti wasn't alone. A woman stood beside his desk, mid-40s, severe features, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. This is Catherine Moore, Moretti said without preamble. She's going to be teaching you. Lena blinked. Teaching me what? How to survive in this world. He gestured to the chairs. Sit. Lena sat. Catherine remained standing, studying her with sharp, assessing eyes. Last night was a warning, Moretti continued. You're not ready for the kind of events you'll be expected to attend as my wife. Catherine will teach you how to handle yourself, how to navigate conversations, how to read people, how to protect yourself. I don't need protection. I have Irina. Irina protects your body. Catherine will protect everything else. He stood and walked to the window, his back to them. These people will try to use you against me, Lena. They'll ask innocent questions that aren't innocent at all. They'll befriend you to get information. They'll look for any weakness and exploit it. You need to be ready. So I'm going to what, spy school? Catherine's lips twitched. Something like that. We'll start with basic situational awareness and work our way up to more advanced techniques. And if I refuse? You won't, Moretti said, still facing the window. Because the alternative is being locked in this house permanently. Is that what you want? Lena looked at Catherine, at her cool professional demeanor and expensive clothes, looked at Moretti's rigid back and the tension in his shoulders. When do we start? She asked quietly. Now. Catherine opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Let's begin with last night. Tell me everything you remember about the dinner conversation. For the next 2 hours, Catherine grilled her. What had Volkov said, and in what tone? Where had each man sat, and how did they interact with each other? What kind of watch had Chen been wearing, and what did that tell you about his current financial status? Lena answered as best she could, but it quickly became clear how much she'd missed. Catherine pointed out power dynamics she hadn't noticed, alliances she hadn't seen, threats disguised as pleasantries. You're not stupid, Catherine said when they finally took a break. But you're naive. That's going to get you killed if we don't fix it. I'm not trying to be a spy. I just want to survive. In this world, those are the same thing. Catherine closed her folder. We'll meet 3 times a week, 2 hours each session. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be able to walk into a room full of predators and walk out unscathed. Is that what you did? Something flickered across Catherine's face. Pain, maybe, or regret. Yes. And I survived. You will too. She left, and Lena sat alone in Moretti's office, processing everything. This was her life now. Bodyguards and training sessions and learning how to spot threats in casual conversation. The door opened and Moretti returned. He'd been gone for the last half hour of her session with Catherine. How did it go? He asked. She thinks I'm naive. You are. He sat behind his desk. But you're also smart enough to learn. Catherine wouldn't have agreed to work with you otherwise. Why are you doing this? Lena asked. All of this. The security, the training. You could just keep me locked up. It would be easier. Easier isn't always better. He picked up a pen, rolled it between his fingers. You were right about one thing. This marriage makes you a target. But it also makes you an asset if you're trained properly. People will underestimate you because you're young and inexperienced. That can be useful. So this is still about business. Everything is about business. But he said it without quite meeting her eyes. Go. Rest. You have school tomorrow, and Catherine again on Wednesday. Lena stood, but something made her pause at the door. Thank you. For last night, for defending me to Volkov. Moretti's hand tightened on the pen. I wasn't defending you. I was defending my decision to marry you. There's a difference. Is there? He finally looked at her, and for just a moment she saw past the cold mask to something raw underneath. Yes, don't forget that. Lena left, but the image of that raw vulnerability stayed with her. Moretti was lying, to her, to himself, maybe to everyone. He could claim this was all business, that she meant nothing, but his actions told a different story. The question was, what story was it telling? And did Lena want to know the answer? She spent the afternoon in the library, trying to read but mostly staring out the window at the grounds. Irina sat nearby, a silent presence Lena was starting to get used to. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, movement near the garden caught her attention. A figure, moving between the hedges. Too far away to make out clearly, but definitely there. Irina, Lena said quietly. The bodyguard was at her side in seconds. What? There, by the fountain. Someone's watching the house. Irina pulled out her phone and spoke rapidly in Russian. Within minutes, Victor and 2 other guards were sweeping the grounds. But by the time they reached the garden, whoever had been there was gone. Victor came to the library personally, his expression grim. Did you get a good look at them? No, just a shadow, really. They were gone before I could see more. Male or female? I don't know. Victor exchanged a look with Irina. Stay here. Don't go near the windows. They left, and Lena was alone with her racing heart and the growing certainty that something was very wrong. Someone had been on the grounds, inside the security perimeter, watching. Dinner that night was tense. Moretti arrived late, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. We found footprints, he said without preamble. Someone was in the garden. They got past the outer security and spent at least 20 minutes watching the house before you spotted them. How is that possible? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He stabbed at his food without eating. This isn't random, Lena. Someone is targeting you specifically. First the photograph, now this. They want you to know you're being watched. Why? To scare you. To make me scared. To show me they can get close whenever they want. He set down his fork. I'm increasing security again. You don't go anywhere without at least 3 guards. That includes inside the house. Adrian, don't argue with me on this. He used her first name so rarely that it made her stop. Someone wants to hurt you to hurt me. I'm not going to let that happen. Because it would make you look weak. Yes. He met her eyes. And because you're mine to protect. There it was again. That possessive edge that shouldn't have made her feel safe, but somehow did. What if we can't stop them? Lena asked quietly. What if they get to me anyway? Then they'll wish they hadn't. The coldness in his voice sent chills down her spine. I've built my reputation on making examples of people who cross me. Whoever's doing this will learn that lesson personally. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkened grounds. Lena watched him. This man she'd married under duress, and tried to understand the growing knot of conflicting emotions in her chest. She should hate him, should be planning her escape, counting the days until the contract expired or she found a way out. Instead, she found herself wanting to walk over to him, to stand beside him at that window and face whatever was coming together. It was a dangerous thought, a stupid thought, but it was there nonetheless, growing stronger every day, and Lena didn't know how to make it stop. The next 48 hours passed without incident, which somehow made everything worse. Lena moved through the house like a prisoner awaiting execution, hyper-aware of every shadow, every sound. The increased security meant armed guards in every hallway, cameras tracking her movements, Victor conducting hourly perimeter checks. The estate had transformed into a fortress, and Lena was trapped at its center. Catherine arrived Wednesday morning with coffee and a tablet loaded with photographs. "Pop quiz," she said, settling into the chair across from Lena in the library. "Tell me everything you can about these people." Lena studied the first image, a middle-aged woman in an evening gown at what looked like a charity gala. "I don't know her." "You will. That's Vivian Castellano. Her husband runs the Port Authority, which means he controls half the shipping coming through the city. She's been married 3 times, has 2 sons from her first marriage, and drinks too much at parties." Catherine swiped to the next photo. "This is Marcus Chen's wife, Lynn. She speaks 4 languages, has a degree in economics from Harvard, and everyone thinks she's just decorative. They're wrong." "Why are you showing me these women?" "Because they're going to be your allies or your enemies, and you need to know which is which before you walk into a room with them." Catherine pulled up another photo. A younger woman, maybe Lena's age, with platinum blonde hair and a calculating smile. "This is Natasha Volkov, Dmitri's daughter. She's dangerous." Lena's stomach tightened. "Dangerous how?" "Smart, ambitious, and completely loyal to her father. If Dmitri decides you're a problem, Natasha will be the knife he sends after you." Catherine set down the tablet. "These women operate in circles you're about to enter. They'll smile at you, invite you to lunches, ask about your marriage. Everything is information gathering. Everything is a test. So I trust no one." "You trust your instincts, and you learn to read people the way they're reading you." Catherine stood and walked to the window, her movements controlled and precise. "I was where you are once. Young, naive, married to a man in this world. I thought I could just keep my head down and survive. What happened? I got my husband killed." Catherine's voice was flat, emotionless. "Because I didn't see the threat until it was too late. Because I trusted the wrong person and said the wrong thing to the wrong woman at the wrong party." She turned to face Lena. "Don't be me. Learn faster." The session continued for another hour, Catherine drilling her on names and faces and connections. By the end, Lena's head throbbed with information, but she'd started to see the web, how everyone connected to everyone else, where the power really lay, who owed what to whom. "You're getting better," Catherine said as she packed up. "Next time, we'll work on reading body language. For now, memorize those faces." After Catherine left, Lena sat alone with the tablet, studying the photographs. These were the people who inhabited Moretti's world, the people she'd have to navigate if she wanted to survive. She was still staring at Natasha Volkov's picture when Mara appeared in the doorway. "There's someone here to see you," Mara said, her expression carefully neutral. "Who?" "Your mother." The world tilted. Lena stood so fast the tablet clattered to the floor. "What? Where?" "Downstairs. Mr. Moretti is with her now." Mara's voice was gentle. "He wanted me to prepare you first." "Prepare me for what?" "For the fact that this visit has rules. You have 15 minutes. You can't discuss anything about this house, Mr. Moretti's business, or your living situation. Victor will be in the room the entire time." "You're telling me I can't even talk to my own mother privately?" "I'm telling you what Mr. Moretti said. If you want to see her, those are the conditions." Lena wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand her rights like she had any in this place. But her mother was downstairs, and 15 minutes was better than nothing. "Take me to her," she said. Her mother sat in a small receiving room off the main hall, perched on the edge of a velvet chair, like she was afraid to touch anything. She looked older than Lena remembered, more gray in her hair, deeper lines around her eyes. When she saw Lena, she stood abruptly. "Baby," she breathed. They met in the middle of the room, and Lena let herself be pulled into her mother's arms. She smelled like the lavender soap she'd used for as long as Lena could remember, and for a moment Lena was 8 years old again, safe and loved and home. Then she remembered where she was, what she'd become. "Are you okay?" her mother asked, pulling back to study Lena's face. "They said you were fine, but I needed to see for myself." "I'm fine, Mom, really." Lena was aware of Victor standing by the door, Moretti somewhere nearby, probably listening to every word. "How are you? How's Dad?" "We're managing." Her mother's eyes were red, like she'd been crying recently. "Your father wants to see you, but they said—" "I know, I can't. Not yet." Lena squeezed her mother's hands. "But I'm okay, I promise. This house." Her mother looked around, taking in the expensive furniture, the artwork, the quiet wealth that permeated everything. "It's so big. Do you live here alone?" "With my husband." The word still felt wrong on her tongue. "And the staff." "I haven't met him yet. Your husband. They rushed us through so fast." Her mother's voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Lena. This is all our fault. If your father hadn't—" "Mom, don't." Lena glanced at Victor, saw him checking his watch. Their time was running out. "It's done. I'm making the best of it. But are you happy?" The question hit like a physical blow. Happy. What a strange concept. Lena wasn't even sure she remembered what happy felt like. "I'm safe," she said, because it was the only truth she could offer. That's what matters. Her mother started to say something else, but the door opened and Moretti entered. He'd changed into a suit since breakfast, looking every inch the powerful businessman. When he crossed to them, Lena saw her mother shrink back slightly. "Mrs. Ward," he said, his voice professionally pleasant. "I hope you've enjoyed your visit." "Yes, thank you for allowing it." Her mother's voice was small, nervous. "I just wanted to make sure my daughter was all right." "Lena is well cared for here. You have my word on that." He placed a hand on Lena's shoulder, a gesture of possession that made her stiffen. "But I'm afraid I need to cut this short. Business calls." It was a dismissal. Her mother recognized it immediately and started gathering her purse. "Wait," Lena said. "Just one more minute. Time's up." Moretti's fingers tightened on her shoulder. "Victor will see your mother out." Lena hugged her mother one more time, breathing in that lavender scent and trying to memorize the feel of her arms. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, baby. So much." Then Victor was guiding her mother toward the door, and Moretti was steering Lena in the opposite direction, and just like that it was over. Lena made it to the second-floor landing before her composure cracked. She yanked herself free from Moretti's grip and rounded on him. 15 minutes? I get 15 minutes with my mother after 2 months? You got what I was willing to give." His voice was cold, distant. "Be grateful for that." "Grateful? You let her think I'm happy here. You played the concerned husband while treating me like—" "Like what? Like my wife? That's what you are, Lena. I'm your prisoner, and you just paraded my mother through here to prove you have me under control. I let her see you because she was making noise, showing up at the gates, calling city officials, threatening to go to the police." Moretti's jaw tightened. "I gave her what she needed to stop being a problem. That's all. She's my mother, not a problem to be managed. And in my world, everyone is a problem to be managed." He stepped closer, and Lena instinctively backed up until she hit the wall. "You want more time with your parents? Earn it. Prove you can be trusted not to say something that gets them killed." "You wouldn't—" "I wouldn't, but Dmitry Volkov would. Marcus Chen would. Antonio Ricci would." His hand slammed into the wall beside her head, making her flinch. "Your parents know you're here. That makes them a vulnerability. The less they know about my business, my house, my life, the safer they are. Do you understand?" Lena's breath came in short gasps. She could feel the heat radiating from Moretti's body, smell his cologne mixed with something sharper, anger, maybe, or fear. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." But he didn't move away. "Your mother asked if you were happy. What did you tell her?" "That I was safe." "Smart answer." His eyes searched her face, looking for something. "Are you? Safe, I mean. Here. With me? Question caught her off guard. I don't know. Am I? I don't know either. He finally stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Someone's watching you. Someone got past my security twice. Until I know who and why, I can't guarantee anything. That's not very reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm trying to keep you alive. He turned toward his office. Stay in your room tonight. Lock the door. Irina will be outside if you need anything. He walked away, leaving Lena alone in the hallway with her racing heart and the phantom warmth of his hand near her face. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark and listened to the house settle around her. Every creak was a footstep. Every whisper of wind against the windows was someone trying to get in. Around midnight, she gave up and walked to the balcony doors. Irina was supposed to be outside her bedroom door, but when Lena peeked out, the hallway was empty. Her stomach dropped. Where was her bodyguard? Lena grabbed her phone and pulled up Moretti's number. She'd never called him before, never even used the contact information Mara had programmed in. Her finger hovered over the call button. A sound from downstairs made her freeze, voices, low and urgent. She crept to her bedroom door and opened it a crack. The hallway was still empty, but she could hear people moving on the floor below. Lots of people. Something was happening. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay put, Lena slipped out of her room and moved toward the stairs. She stayed in the shadows, pressing herself against the wall as voices grew louder. Found her in the garden. She's been dead at least an hour. Lena's blood turned to ice. She peered over the railing and saw Victor standing in the entrance hall with Moretti and 3 other guards. And on the floor between them, covered by a sheet, was a body. Who is it? Moretti's voice was deadly calm. Maria, the housekeeper. Victor pulled back the sheet, and Lena caught a glimpse of the woman's face before she had to look away. Single gunshot to the head. Professional. Maria. The same housekeeper who'd planted the photograph in Lena's room. The one who'd been too scared to talk. Where was Irina? Moretti asked. Perimeter check. We pulled everyone for a full sweep after the last incident. Victor's jaw was tight. Someone knew our rotation, knew exactly when to strike. So we have a mole. Moretti's voice was soft, dangerous. Someone on my staff is working with whoever's targeting Lena. It looks that way. Find them. Moretti turned away from the body. I want every person in this house questioned. I want their financials, their phone records, their entire lives torn apart. Someone here sold us out, and I want their head. What about the girl? Lock down the east wing. No one in or out without my permission. And find Irina. I want to know why she wasn't at her post. Lena's heart hammered. She needed to get back to her room before they realized she was watching. But as she started to retreat, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. She tried to scream, but the hand pressed harder. An arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet. Quiet, a woman's voice whispered in her ear. I'm not going to hurt you, but you need to come with me, now. Lena thrashed, trying to break free, but the woman was strong. She dragged Lena backward, away from the stairs, down a hallway Lena didn't recognize. Stop fighting, the woman hissed. I'm trying to save your life. They turned a corner, and the woman finally released her. Lena spun around and found herself face to face with Irina. What the hell are you doing? Lena gasped. Getting you somewhere safe. Irina's face was grim. Maria's death isn't random. It's a message. A message about what? About what happens to people who help you. Irina grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her toward a door at the end of the hallway. Maria wasn't working against you. She was trying to warn you. Warn me about what? Irina opened the door, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. About who's really behind all this. I don't understand. You will. Irina started down the stairs, forcing Lena to follow. But first, we need to get you away from the main house. If I'm right about what's happening, nowhere up there is safe. They descended into darkness, Irina using her phone flashlight to illuminate the way. The stairs seemed to go on forever, and the air grew colder with each step. Finally, they reached the bottom and emerged into what looked like a wine cellar. Irina locked the door behind them and led Lena through rows of expensive bottles to a small room in the back. Inside was a cot, a table, and a locked cabinet. What is this place? Lena asked. Safe room. Mr. Moretti had it built when he first bought the estate. Only a handful of people know it exists. Irina opened the cabinet and pulled out a gun, checking the chamber with practiced efficiency. You're going to stay here until I figure out who the mole is. I don't want to stay here alone. You won't be alone. I'll be right outside. Irina met her eyes. But I need you to trust me, Lena. Can you do that? I don't even know you. I know. But right now, I'm all you've got. Irina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and swore. They're looking for you. I need to go back up and buy us some time. What should I tell them if they find me? They won't. This room doesn't appear on any blueprints. As far as anyone knows, it doesn't exist. Irina moved toward the door. Don't open this door for anyone but me. I don't care if they say they're Mr. Moretti, Victor, anyone. You only open it for me. How will I know it's you? I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. She demonstrated. That's the signal. Anything else, you stay hidden and stay quiet. Before Lena could respond, Irina was gone. The lock clicked into place, and Lena was alone in the underground room with nothing but a cot and her fear. She sat on the cot and tried to process everything. Maria was dead. Someone on Moretti's staff was a traitor, and Irina, her bodyguard, had just hidden her in a secret room because nowhere else was safe. The walls felt like they were closing in. Lena pulled her knees to her chest and tried to control her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't panic. Don't scream. Time became meaningless. Minutes or hours could have passed. Lena couldn't tell. Her phone had no signal down here, and the single bulb overhead gave no indication of whether it was night or day. Finally, footsteps sounded outside. Lena held her breath. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 more. She opened the door to find Irina, looking haggard and worried. We have a problem, Irina said without preamble. Mr. Moretti knows you're missing. The whole house is on lockdown. He thinks someone took you. Didn't you tell him where I am? I can't. Not yet. Irina paced the small room. I need more time to figure out who the mole is before we surface you. If the wrong person knows you're alive and safe, they'll try again. So what do? We wait and we watch. Irina pulled out her phone and showed Lena what looked like security footage. I tapped into the house cameras. We can monitor everyone's movements from here. On the screen, Lena could see Moretti in his office, surrounded by Victor and his security team. His face was a mask of controlled fury, but his hands were clenched into fists. He looks angry, Lena whispered. He's terrified. Irina scrolled through other camera feeds. I've never seen him like this. He's torn apart half the house looking for you. Because I'm his property, his investment. Keep telling yourself that. Irina gave her a look. But I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 3 years, and I've never seen him lose control like this. Not over business, not over money, not over anything. Lena watched the screen as Moretti stood abruptly, swept everything off his desk in a violent motion, and stormed toward the door. The footage showed him in the hallway, then the entrance hall, then the grounds, searching with a desperation that made Lena's chest ache. I should tell him I'm okay, she said. Not yet. Give me 2 more hours to narrow down the suspects. Irina switched to a different camera. Right now, anyone could be the mole. Half the staff is terrified, the other half is acting suspicious because they're terrified. I need time to sort through it. And if you can't figure it out in 2 hours, then we surface you and deal with the consequences. Irina's jaw was tight, but I'm hoping it won't come to that. Lena watched the screens as Irina cycled through different cameras. The kitchen staff huddled together, whispering, the security team spreading out across the grounds. Mara in the hallway outside Lena's room, her face pale and worried. And Moretti, everywhere and nowhere, searching with an intensity that scared Lena more than anything else that had happened tonight. There, Irina said suddenly, zooming in on one feed. Look at that. On the screen, a figure moved through the garden. They wore dark clothes and moved with purpose, heading toward the east wing. Who is that? Lena asked. I don't know, but they're not supposed to be there. Irina stood. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone. Wait. But Irina was already gone, moving fast and silent. Lena locked the door and returned to the screens, her heart in her throat. She watched as Irina appeared on the garden camera, following the mysterious figure, watched as they rounded a corner and disappeared from view. Then the feed went black. All of them. Every camera in the house shut down simultaneously. Lena stared at the blank screens, panic rising in her throat. Something was very wrong. She was reaching for the door when she heard it, footsteps in the wine cellar. Multiple sets. Coming closer. Lena backed away from the door looking for somewhere to hide, but the room was small, bare. Nowhere to go. The footsteps stopped right outside. A voice spoke, muffled by the door. "I know you're in there, Lena." Not Irina's voice. A man's voice. Familiar, but she couldn't place it. "Come out. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk." Lena pressed herself against the far wall, breathing as quietly as possible. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," the voice continued. "But either way, this door's coming open. You might as well make it simple." A pause. Then another voice, female this time. "Break it down." The sound of metal on wood. The door shuddering under impact. Lena looked around frantically for a weapon. Anything, but there was nothing. The door splintered, crashed open, and through the opening stepped the last person Lena expected to see. Mara. Behind her stood a man Lena had never seen before. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes the same cold gray as Moretti's. "Hello, sister-in-law," the man said, smiling. "I'm Elias. I think it's time we had a chat about my brother." Lena's world narrowed to the man standing in the doorway. He had Moretti's eyes, Moretti's sharp features. But where Adrian's face was controlled and cold, Elias's held something wilder, dangerous in a different way. "Mara?" Lena's voice came out hoarse. "What are you doing?" "My job." Mara stepped into the room, her expression apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Lena. I really am. But this needs to happen." "What needs to happen? Who is he?" "I told you. I'm Elias Moretti." The man moved closer and Lena pressed herself harder against the wall. Adrian's younger brother, the one he exiled 5 years ago for having the audacity to question his methods. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You just need to come with us." Elias gestured toward the door. "Quietly, preferably. But I'm not above using force if necessary." "Where's Irina?" "Unconscious in the garden. She'll wake up with a headache, nothing permanent." He smiled, and it was nothing like Adrian's rare attempts at warmth. This smile was all edges. "I don't kill people unless I have to. Unlike my brother." "Adrian will find you. He'll what? Tear the house apart. He's already doing that." Elias pulled out his phone and showed her security footage. Adrian stalking through hallways, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "He's losing his mind looking for you. It's beautiful, really. I didn't think he still had it in him to care about anything." "He doesn't care about me. I'm just property, a business transaction." Elias laughed. "Keep telling yourself that. But I've been watching you both for weeks now, and the way my brother looks at you when he thinks no one's paying attention, that's not business, sister-in-law. That's something much more dangerous. You're the one who's been watching me. The photograph, Maria. Everything." Maria was Mara's contact. "Poor thing got cold feet, threatened to tell Adrian everything. We couldn't have that." Elias's voice was casual, like they were discussing the weather. "The rest was me. Yes. I needed to understand what you meant to my brother. Needed to know if you were the key to breaking him." "And am I?" "Oh, absolutely." He extended his hand. "Now come on, we're wasting time." Lena looked at Mara, searching for some sign of the woman who'd helped her, guided her, protected her these past weeks. But Mara's face was closed off, professional. "How long?" Lena asked quietly. "How long have you been working for him?" "Since before you arrived. Mr. Moretti, Adrian, hired me thinking I was just another staff member. He didn't know Elias had gotten to me first." Mara's voice held genuine regret. "I didn't want to hurt you, Lena, but Elias is right. This needed to happen." "Why? What does he want?" "What I've always wanted." Elias's smile faded. "What should have been mine? Adrian took everything when he forced me out. My position, my reputation, my future. Now I'm taking something of his." "I'm not his. I'm just, you're everything." Elias grabbed her arm, his grip iron tight. "And that's exactly why this works. Now move." He dragged her toward the door. Lena fought, digging her heels in, but he was stronger. Mara followed behind, her face troubled, but her silence damning. They hauled her through the wine cellar and up a different staircase, one Lena had never seen. They emerged in what looked like a service hallway, empty and dark. The house was silent around them, too silent. Where was everyone? This way. Elias pulled her toward a door at the end of the hall. My brother's security is good, but they can't be everywhere at once, especially when they're all busy searching for you. Someone will see us. I'm counting on it. He pushed through the door and into the main hallway. I want Adrian to know I have you. Want him to understand exactly what he's lost. They turned a corner and ran straight into Victor. The security chief took in the scene in a heartbeat. Elias holding Lena, Mara behind them, Lena's terrified face. His hand went to his weapon. Let her go, Victor said, his voice deadly calm. I don't think so. Elias pulled Lena closer, using her as a shield. Tell my brother I have his wife. Tell him if he wants her back alive, he'll meet me in the East Garden, alone, 30 minutes. He'll kill you. He'll try. Elias started backing toward another hallway. But he won't risk hurting her. That's his weakness now. 30 minutes, Victor. Don't be late. He yanked Lena through a door and down another set of stairs. They emerged outside, the night air cold against Lena's face. The garden spread before them, shadows and moonlight making everything look unfamiliar. Why are you doing this? Lena gasped as Elias dragged her toward the fountain. If you hate Adrian so much, just kill him yourself. Why use me? Because killing him isn't enough. Elias stopped at the fountain's edge and finally released her arm. I want him to suffer first. Want him to know what it feels like to lose everything that matters. I don't matter to him. Then why is he tearing his empire apart trying to find you? Elias pulled out his phone and held it up. On the screen was live footage from inside the house. Adrian in the entrance hall, Victor speaking urgently to him. Adrian's face went white as Victor delivered the message. Look at him, Lena. That's not a man who doesn't care. Lena watched as Adrian listened to Victor, his expression shifting from shock to fury to something that looked almost like fear. He grabbed Victor by the collar and said something sharp, then released him and headed for the door. He's coming, Elias said with satisfaction, right on schedule. And then what, you kill him in front of me? Maybe, or maybe I make him choose his life or yours. Either way, I win. He pocketed his phone. You should know I don't actually want to hurt you. You seem nice enough. But you married into this family, which means you're part of this now. Collateral damage. There's still time to stop this. Whatever happened between you and Adrian, he left me for dead. Elias's voice went hard. 5 years ago, when our enemies came after us, Adrian chose to save himself and let me take the fall. I spent 2 years in a prison that makes hell look pleasant, while he built his empire on my sacrifice. So no, there's no stopping this. This ends tonight. Movement at the edge of the garden made them both turn. Adrian appeared from between the hedges, alone as instructed. He changed into dark clothes, and even from a distance, Lena could see the tension in every line of his body. Let her go, Elias, Adrian called out. Hello, brother. Elias kept one hand on Lena's shoulder, holding her in place. Nice of you to join us. I was beginning to think you didn't care. This is between us. She has nothing to do with it. She has everything to do with it. She's your weakness. Elias's fingers tightened on Lena's shoulder. I spent weeks trying to figure out how to hurt you. Tried going after your businesses, your allies, your reputation. None of it worked. You're too well protected. But then I realized you'd gone and done something incredibly stupid. What? You fell in love with your wife. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Adrian went very still. That's ridiculous, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Then walk away. Leave her here with me and go back to your house. Prove she means nothing, Elias smiled. Or admit the truth and beg me to let her go. Adrian's jaw clenched. His eyes met Lena's across the distance, and she saw something raw in them, something that made her chest ache. Please, Adrian said quietly, let her go. Take me instead. There it is, Elias laughed. The great Adrian Moretti, begging. I never thought I'd see the day. You want revenge? You want me to suffer? Fine. I'm offering myself. Let Lena walk away, and you can do whatever you want to me. Adrian, no. Lena started, but Elias's hand clamped over her mouth. Tempting, Elias said, but I think I'll keep both options open. Mara? Mara emerged from the shadows, gun in hand. She looked sick about it, but she raised the weapon and pointed it at Adrian. Don't, Lena tried to say against Elias's hand. Here's what's going to happen, Elias continued. You're going to get on your knees, brother. You're going to admit what you did to me 5 years ago, and then you're going to beg me to spare her life. I'll do it. Adrian didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees on the wet grass. I left you behind. I chose myself over you. I've regretted it every day since. Liar. It's the truth. Adrian's voice was rough. You were my brother, and I abandoned you. I'm sorry, Elias. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 2 years of my life. Sorry doesn't undo what happened to me in that place. Elias's voice shook with rage. But watching you lose everything? That might come close. He released Lena's mouth and pulled out his own weapon, pressing it to the back of her head. Lena's knees nearly gave out. Choose, Elias said to Adrian. I shoot her now, or you trade places. But either way, someone's dying tonight. Take me. Adrian started to stand. Just let her go first. No, Lena said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Don't do this for me. I'm not worth it. You're worth everything. Adrian's eyes locked on hers. I'm sorry, Lena, for all of it. For forcing you into this marriage, for treating you like property, for not telling you sooner that you became the best part of my day. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. Tears burned Lena's eyes. Adrian, I love you. He said it simply, like a fact. I didn't mean to, didn't want to, but I do. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Elias laughed, but it sounded hollow. How touching. The monster learned to love. He cocked the gun. Doesn't change anything. Actually, it does. The new voice came from behind them. Lena twisted to see Irina emerging from the darkness, blood running down her face but very much conscious. Behind her was Victor and a dozen armed guards, all with weapons trained on Elias and Mara. Put the gun down, Irina said. It's over. Elias's hand tightened on his weapon. You were supposed to be unconscious. I was. Then I woke up and tracked your phone signal. She moved closer, her own gun steady. Let her go, Elias. You're surrounded. For a long moment, no one moved. Lena could feel Elias's indecision, the gun trembling slightly against her head. Across the garden, Adrian watched with the stillness of a predator waiting to strike. Then Mara lowered her weapon. It's over, she said quietly. Elias, it's over. Let her go. Traitor, Elias spat. I didn't sign up for murder. I thought we were just going to scare her, mess with Adrian's head. But you killed Maria. You've lost yourself. Mara's voice was sad. This isn't the man I agreed to help. Elias's arm dropped. The gun fell from his grip. And in that moment of hesitation, Adrian moved. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, grabbed Lena, and pulled her away from his brother. Victor and his team swarmed Elias, restraining him before he could react. Lena found herself wrapped in Adrian's arms, his heart hammering against her ear. His hands were in her hair, on her face, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? He demanded. Did he hurt you? I'm fine. I'm okay. She pulled back to look at him. You love me? I just confessed that in front of my entire security team. I think it's a little late to take it back. He touched her face like he couldn't believe she was real. I'm sorry. For everything. You were going to trade your life for mine. Of course I was. You're mine, Lena. That means I protect you, even from my own mistakes. Victor hauled Elias to his feet. The resemblance between the brothers was striking up close. Same build, same features, but where Adrian held himself with controlled power, Elias looked broken. I could have killed her, Elias said, his voice hollow. I had the shot. But you didn't. Adrian's arm tightened around Lena. Because, despite everything, you're not a murderer. Not really. You don't know what I am. You left me to rot. I know. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Adrian moved closer to his brother, bringing Lena with him. But this ends now. No more revenge. No more blood between us. What are you going to do? Kill me? No. Adrian looked at Victor. Put him on a plane, first flight to anywhere far from here. Give him enough money to start over and make it clear he's never to come back. Elias stared at him. Why? Because you're my brother. Because I owe you that much. Adrian's voice was rough. And because I'm done losing people I care about. Victor led Elias away, Mara following under guard. The garden slowly emptied until only Lena, Adrian, and Irina remained. I should have seen it sooner, Irina said, looking exhausted. Should have known Mara was the inside connection. You kept Lena safe. That's all that matters. Adrian pulled Lena closer. Take the rest of the night off. We'll debrief in the morning. Irina nodded and left, leaving them alone in the moonlit garden. Lena looked up at the man she'd married, this complicated, damaged person who'd just offered his life for hers. You really love me? I really love you. He said it easier this time, like the words were becoming familiar. I didn't want to. You were supposed to be a contract, nothing more. But you wore me down. Your strength, your stubbornness, the way you refused to just disappear into the background. He touched her face. You made me remember what it feels like to care about something other than power. I love you too, Lena whispered. I didn't want to either. You're bossy and controlling, and you bought me like property. Not my finest moment. But you're also brave and protective, and you just got on your knees in front of your worst enemy for me. She wound her arms around his neck. So I guess we're both idiots. Seems that way. He leaned down and kissed her, soft and careful, like she was something precious. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. Things are going to change. No more treating you like property. No more controlling every aspect of your life. You're my wife, my partner, my equal. If that's something you want, it is. Lena's heart felt too big for her chest. But I want one more thing. Name it. My parents. I want to see them, really see them, not 15-minute supervised visits. Done. I'll have them brought here tomorrow. They can stay as long as you want. He kissed her forehead. Anything else? The school. I want to keep going. With better security this time, but yes. And I want you to tell me about your business. Not everything, but enough that I understand the world I'm part of. She met his eyes. No more secrets between us. That's a dangerous ask. I married into danger the night your men showed up at my apartment. I'd rather face it knowing the truth than living in ignorance. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. I'll tell you everything, but not tonight. Tonight, I just want to hold you and remember that you're safe. He swept her up in his arms, carrying her back toward the house. Lena rested her head against his shoulder and watched the stars above them. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out how to be married for real, how to trust each other, how to build something that isn't based on contracts and debts. He looked down at her. Think we can do it? I think we can try. The next weeks passed in a blur of change. Elias was sent to Europe with enough money to start fresh and strict instructions never to return. Mara was released with similar conditions. No charges filed, but her career in Moretti's world was over. The security team was overhauled, new faces brought in, protocols strengthened. Lena's parents moved into a guest house on the estate, close enough to visit daily, but far enough to give everyone privacy. Her father broke down crying the first time he saw her, apologizing until Lena made him stop. They'd never be perfect, but they were trying. Catherine continued her lessons, but now they felt less like survival training and more like education. Lena was learning to navigate Moretti's world not as a victim, but as an active participant. She attended dinners and galas, met with the wives of Adrian's associates, and slowly began carving out her own space in his empire. The school visits continued, with Irina always nearby but less obvious about it. The kids loved the stories Lena told them, especially the ones about brave girls who saved themselves. And Adrian was trying. The cold, controlled man she'd married was still there, probably always would be. But now there were moments of warmth. Genuine smiles. Conversations that lasted hours. Hands that reached for her not in ownership, but in comfort. 3 months after the confrontation in the garden, Lena stood in Adrian's office and watched him work. He'd been on the phone for an hour, negotiating something complex and probably illegal, but when he noticed her watching, he smiled. Almost done, he said, covering the phone. Give me 5 minutes. Take your time. She settled into the chair across from his desk, content to wait. When he finally hung up, he came around the desk and pulled her to her feet. I have something for you, he said. If it's another piece of expensive jewelry, I'm going to throw it at you. It's not jewelry. He led her to his desk and pulled out a folder. It's your father's debt, the original contract with Volkov. Lena's breath caught as she opened the folder and saw the papers inside, the contract that had started all of this. I bought it from Dmitri last week, Adrian continued. Paid twice what your father owed, but it was worth it. Why? So I could do this. He took the papers, walked to the fireplace, and threw them in. They watched together as the flames consumed the contract, turning it to ash. You're free, Lena. Your father's debt is cleared. Our marriage is no longer based on a transaction. So what is it based on? This. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. No diamonds, no showing off, just a promise that I choose you, every day. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Lena looked at the ring, then at the man offering it. The same man who told her she meant nothing now looking at her like she was everything. Are you asking me to marry you? Again? I'm asking you to stay. To build a life with me. Not as my possession, but as my partner. His voice was soft. I love you, Lena Ward. Will you stay? She could leave. The debt was cleared, the contract void. She could walk away from this world of danger and power and violence, go back to her simple life serving coffee and helping kids with art projects. But she'd never been good at simple. Yes, she said, I'll stay. He slipped the ring on her finger and it felt different than the first one, lighter somehow, like a promise instead of a chain. Thank you, he said against her lips. For what? For seeing past what I pretended to be, for making me want to be better. He kissed her properly then, deep and slow and full of promise, for choosing me even when you didn't have to. Lena wrapped her arms around him and let herself be held. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the estate grounds, painting everything gold. In the distance, she could hear her parents laughing about something, their voices carrying on the wind. This wasn't the life she'd planned, wasn't the fairy tale anyone hoped for. It was complicated and messy and sometimes still scary. But it was hers. They were building it together, one honest conversation at a time. I love you, she said. I love you too. Adrian held her tighter. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. 6 months later, Lena stood in front of the mirror in her room and studied her reflection. The woman looking back was different from the terrified girl who'd signed that contract. Stronger, steadier, someone who knew how to navigate dangerous waters and hold her own. You ready? Adrian appeared in the doorway, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most cars. But it was the way he looked at her that took her breath away, like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Ready. She took his offered arm. They were hosting a charity gala tonight, raising money for schools in underserved communities. It had been Lena's idea, and Adrian had thrown his considerable resources behind it. Half the city's power players would be there, and Lena would stand beside her husband as his equal. As they descended the stairs together, Lena caught sight of her parents in the entrance hall, dressed for the event. Her mother beamed at her, and her father looked proud. Irina stood nearby, professional as always, but with the hint of a smile. Even Catherine had accepted the invitation, though she'd probably spend the night analyzing everyone's behavior. Nervous? Adrian asked quietly. Terrified, Lena admitted. But the good kind. There's a good kind of terrified? The kind that means you care about something. She squeezed his arm. The kind that means you have something worth fighting for. He pulled her closer, kissing her temple. Then I'm terrified all the time. The doorbell rang, announcing the first guests. Victor opened the door to reveal Vivian Castellano and her husband, followed by Chen's wife Lynn and a dozen others. Lena took a deep breath and stepped forward with Adrian at her side. This was her world now, dangerous and beautiful, and full of people who would smile while plotting your downfall. But she was ready for it. She'd survived being sold to a crime lord, survived assassination attempts and family betrayals and her own breaking point. She'd learned to love a man who'd bought her like property and discovered he was capable of change. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. As the gala filled with guests and music and laughter, Lena caught Adrian's eye across the room. He was in conversation with Marcus Chen, but he was watching her, always watching her, protecting her, loving her. She smiled, and he smiled back, and in that moment, Lena knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. The contract that had brought them together was ash. What remained was real, messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but real. And that was worth everything.